Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scovill.
All right. Welcome to the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we share tactical, practical, and spiritual advice to help you do your wealth well done. Last week, we had Sean Henry on from Firebox, and this week we are continuing this series that we've been focused on private equity to help the listeners here understand more of what a private equity investment looks like, how you go about that, and honestly, what some of the return potential is here. And we try not to talk too much return here in just kind of the generic setting, but some of these returns are have the potential to be quite high. And so, anyways, if someone wants to discuss that further, please reach out. You know how to get a hold of us here. Otherwise, obviously, we want all of this to be under the advice of your financial team. And so, none of this stuff here is meant to be financial advice for you. It's meant to be educational in nature, and continue to expand your horizons of what you think is possible out there from the investment world. So this week, I'm excited to have on the founder of Renu Environmental, Alex Smith. Alex, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Always great to speak with you.
Yeah, man. Alex is becoming a dear brother in Christ the more time we spend together. And so we have partnered with him here, and through all of the work that we've gone through since then, it's been wonderful to see the character, your integrity, and honestly the perseverance that it takes to be an entrepreneur in a space like this, and pushing the limits of what's possible. So excited for this discussion here. So far in this series here, we have covered the opioid epidemic, we've covered devastation from wildfires, and now we are switching to another well-known topic, which is plastics and recycling. And so Alex is going to talk to us a little bit about the extent of the problem here, and then honestly what the world's top inventors are doing to try to combat that problem. So with that, I want to back up just a little bit here and talk about the, when we talk about recycling, we're talking about a number of things, but the bulk of the effort, or the bulk of the thought around that, is really in plastics. But you have other components to this. You have glass, you have metal, and the main thing that we're going to be talking about today, though, is plastic. So when we talk about plastic here, one of the things we have to understand is what it's comprised of, and basically how to understand what the half-life of plastic is, and how long, therefore, it sits inside a landfill. And I don't know if you have any of those stats off the top of your head, but I mean, it's hundreds or thousands of years that, and depending on the type of material composition of plastic, that's going to sit inside landfills.
Right.
I think
as it deteriorates, it releases methane and greenhouse gases. It's just not healthy. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the rate at which the U.S. is continuing to increase the amount of waste that we're pumping in is growing dramatically here. The amount of plastic that we are consuming now, I saw there was 2.4 billion pounds of plastic waste is exported by the U.S. every year. And some of these statistics here get kind of staggering. The number of, let's see here, 900 million tons of plastic are currently sitting inside U.S. landfills. Like 900 million tons of that. We're adding 40 million tons of that a year just to plastic here. They're estimating that the use of plastic is going to triple by 2050. Which would, in essence,
the production of plastics, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the theory behind
that? Well, as you can see, throughout the course of the last 50 years, plastic has become a very valuable product in what it can create and what we can make with plastics that replaces metals or other materials that make it just as strong, lighter weight, and cheaper to produce. And one easy example to look at is electric cars. There's a lot of components that are being replaced by plastic components to decrease the weight of the car so that it can have a longer range. And this is also being applied to air transportation, to airplanes. A lot of the parts are being 3D printed now out of plastic material, out of polymers, to make these components for the airplanes, to make them lighter weight. Again, longer travel, less emissions. That's always the goal.
Okay, yeah, I think when the average person thinks about plastic waste, we're thinking about what we do. We're not thinking about industrial and the industrial waste behind this, which I know we're going to get to more when we start talking about Renu Environmental. But the industrial component of plastic waste it just dwarfs all of the personal waste.
Yeah, even if we eliminated all single-use plastics, which I think would be a great thing. I'm not trying to increase plastic waste. We have plenty of it to take care of as it is. As an industry whole, plastics are not going away. We need to learn how to mitigate the waste side of it after it's spent and used, and find a way to create circularity from the plastic waste rather than just getting rid of all single-use plastics. Or even further, many people are asking to stop the production of plastics in general, which, as you can imagine, isn't really realistic. So the most viable solution to limit plastic devastation in our environment is to find a circular solution for it, which is what we're trying to do.
What does that mean? What's a circular solution mean?
Taking plastic waste instead of it eventually ending up in the landfill or the environment, that we create new products from that plastic. Basically, by what we're trying to do is break it down into its original building blocks, raw material, if you will, which is derived from oil, and turn that back into new polymers for fresh virgin plastic production. The problem with mechanical recycling or traditional recycling is that every time plastic is recycled mechanically, it deteriorates in quality. So it can only be used, recycled so many times before it is eventually destined for landfill. And during the process of recycling, you also look at bottle manufacturers for Coca-Cola or Pepsi. There's only a certain percentage of recycled product that goes into that. It's not like paper bags where you can go 100% recycled material. You can't really go 100% recycled plastic and have the same quality as if you produced it from virgin materials. So we're trying to reverse the process of the plastic product back into its original form, so that it can be repolymerized to make high quality plastics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're gonna spend a lot more time on that here.
I know that was a lot to take in.
Well, that's a teaser for what's to come here and what Alex and the Renu team are doing. So when we look at you mentioned a little bit about the stuff that goes into the landfill or the environment. I want to talk about the environment for a minute. One of the things that I learned through this process of working with you guys is, and I continue to, it's like this for nearly anything you think about, is the difference between America and other parts of the world. So if we talk about third world countries, Southeast Asia or other places like that, the issue that plastics present to them compared to America, where we have billions upon billions of dollars that are focused just on trash collection. We got nice clean garbage trucks that take our all of our trash and move it somewhere else that we don't see it anymore. What's that like in other parts of the world?
It's devastating to see. It's just part of their because they don't have the infrastructure for curbside collection. They don't even have curbs in a lot of these places, so they don't have the infrastructure for collection of their waste. It's just common practice to just dump it in the local river, and they think that that's just what is acceptable and that's the norm. That's what they've been doing for decades, and it's devastating. And of course, those rivers lead to oceans eventually, and that's where we are now with the plastic islands that are really a problem. We see them growing.
And so, if anyone isn't familiar with the plastic islands, what is the Great Pacific Trash Island?
It's a huge conglomeration of plastic waste. A lot of it is fishing debris, but it's because of how the ocean tides move in the Pacific. Everything floating, all the plastics kind of congregated to one area, but in its size right now, it's larger than the state of Texas. And I'm not saying it's an island that you can walk on, of course, but there's a tremendous amount. I can't even give a stat to how much plastic is in there, but billions of microplastics, which are obviously consumed by the wildlife, and a lot of these plastics that come from these Southeast Asian countries that are single-use water bottle, let's say, that someone throws in a river because there's no trash can, that also ends up there. So it's pretty staggering when you look at the numbers. I do have one stat on this. Roughly 22 million tons of plastic leak into our environment every year, not just in the oceans, but throughout our environment. And to put that into perspective, this was kind of impactful for me. That is the equivalent of 250 garbage trucks full of nothing but plastic waste, lifting up and dumping their entire load into a river or ocean or environment every hour. 250 garbage trucks full of plastic every hour. It's not insignificant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I had pulled a stat here that they had estimated it was at least 160 million pounds of plastic in there. And, basically of this trash island, you mentioned a lot of it's fishing, but a lot of even that fishing equipment is also plastic. So I said, like, they're anticipating that it's somewhere around in the high 90s in terms of percentile of what on that Great Pacific Trash Island that you mentioned is the size of Texas, and that is made up of plastic. And so we also have other problems with plastic too here, or recycling, like tires. So they had a stat I grabbed on this is it's basically we have roughly 300 million tires per year that wind up into landfill as well, and those have all sorts of issues, very similar to plastics, with the leaching, with the extremely long half-life here as well, and just the volume that they take up. You picture 300 million tires that the U.S. disposes of per year.
Yeah, think about what that looks like globally. The U.S. is at 300 million. That's one country. Yeah.
And there are stats that show, of the U.S. is, I don't have off the top of my head, but maybe the U.S. is like 4% of the population of the world or something like that. But we produce about 12% of the waste, and so even though we're way out producing our waste comparatively, that's still a pretty that's a small percentage. It's an eighth of what is actually happening there. So that you apply that to the tires, you apply that to plastic or anything else there. And most of these other countries don't have near the effort. And not some of them do. You go to Sweden and they have some pretty strict guidelines around their recycling. But the bulk of the world's population is not in places like Sweden or other places that have extreme efforts there. It's in these other places that have they're way less strict and way less focused on the environment because they're focused on surviving. As we don't focus on surviving anymore in the U.S. here, we focus on, we get more nitpicky in the other details. But in other parts of the world, they don't care about the smog. They care about what they're going to feed their kids today.
And they don't even know what emissions are. It's a different perspective for sure.
So we can just shift gears back to the U.S. here for right now. Obviously, it's a shared planet, but just looking at the U.S. recycling, we in my family, we don't have recycling pickup at our house, so we will we will literally collect everything and we will take that to where we can recycle it. And we go through a lot of effort to put the emphasis on recycling. We we collect all of the grocery bags, and I know in other parts of the country you have to buy the plastic grocery bags. Where we're at, you still they'll use 3 grocery bags to give you a patch of bananas here. Like the waste in it is so much. But we collect all those and bring those back to the grocery store, and then and I give my wife a hard time about that because the pile of the bags just builds up and builds up in our garage, and I'm just like, we got to get rid of these things. So we take them to the grocery store, and the one of the last times we did that, we were talking, we were kind of apologizing for how big of a load we were bringing in of these, and they didn't have room in their little container at the front of the store, and the worker there said, "Oh, it's no problem. We just take them back and throw them away anyways."
I was going to say, how do you know what they do with them after you give them to them? Yeah,
right.
I think it's the biggest problem.
So let's talk about that. So when we recycle, good for us. We'll all pat ourselves on the back. We got a green thumb. We recycle, and we go through extra effort to sort through our trash and make sure we do that. How much of that's actually going to recycling? Like, what's that process looking like right now?
Let me take you through the process a little bit, and this, of course, varies state to state and even city by city. But where I live in California, we're pretty stringent on recycling, or at least they like to have the appearance, put out that appearance that they are strict on recycling. But in reality, the majority of our recycling centers have shut down in the last 10 years because it's really not profitable for mechanical recycling. But aside from that,
in California, the state that's leading the charge in all this, they've shut down
a lot of the recycling centers and the collection centers. It's not profitable. Bottom lines. So what happens here is, we have a blue bin that you're supposed to put all your recyclables into. We segregate our trash from all the recyclables. We put them in there. It gets picked up into a trash truck curbside that gets sent to what's called a MRF, Material Recovery Facility. And these are, being in LA County, there's quite a few of these. They're large facilities where they dump all the recyclables and then they sort through them, separating the plastics from, aluminum, other metals, paper, styrofoam, etc. After they kind of separate the recyclables, the problem with recycling plastics is that only the number 1 and number 2 plastics generally get recycled because it's the only ones that can be profitable. The other ones, number 3 through number 7 plastics are either too difficult to separate and to process, or too expensive. So number 1 being clear water bottles. Think about any generic water bottle. Number 2 is high density polyethylene, which is most commonly, think about a shampoo bottle that's not clear, and those get processed. Everything else gets pretty much lumped into a group of non-recyclable plastics, and generally gets sent to the landfill, and they pay the landfill to dump them. It's kind of a crazy system.
This is a kick in the gut to the majority of recyclers here who think that they're doing good by all this. And if they know that everything that's outside of number 1 and number 2 plastic is just going straight to the landfill.
Generally speaking, it's certainly, there are some municipalities that have better practices, and then some that are much worse. Unfortunately, still many counties in the U.S. don't have a curbside recycling bin as an option, which blows my mind. That seems like an easy step 1, to start processing plastics.
It's where, where we're at, we live in a county that absolutely does that. But if my house was 100 feet closer to my mailbox, then they would do it. But because of the distance from my front door to my mailbox, they won't come and do it at our place. So we have to haul it in. But we've always been faithful recyclers, and so we will go through the extra effort to do that, and it makes us feel really good when we put our waste into that left garbage can instead of the right one. But at the same time, that's disheartening to hear that it's like this. So part of the issue is that the polymers inside of here are breaking down of a lower quality every time that they're recycled. And so therefore that's probably has something to do with why number 3 and on aren't as profitable. What is but you mentioned the other side of this being the financial side of not just the structural integrity, but the financial side of this. What is the government doing now to try to help this?
There's been a lot of states that have passed legislation that will advance other recycling methods, such as what we're doing. It falls into a category called advanced recycling or chemical recycling. There's multiple different processes or methods within this category. What we're doing is lumped into a category called pyrolysis, which I don't particularly like being lumped in that category because by definition, by root word, pyro, fire, and lysis is the decomposition or breaking down of. So pyrolysis has been around for over 50 years. And if you can imagine back 50 years ago, they were just burning plastics and think of this black smoke, and they're trying to recapture some of those vapors and turn that back into an oil. But everything else is just nasty emissions. So because of that, pyrolysis was lumped into the same category as incineration, which now pyrolysis has come a tremendously long way, and I can get into where it has come, how far it's come, and how our technology differs from previous technologies, and why it should really be in a category of its own. It's not what it used to be, and so that's one thing I'm trying to do is to change that.
Yeah. No, let's take the conversation there. Help us understand what has been going on, let's say for the last decade or so inside the industry with efforts to try to come up with a better way to capture all of these other plastics. And then we can talk about, what Renu Environmental is doing.
So it's the process of pyrolysis. Essentially, you're trying to vaporize plastics, and those vapors are hydrocarbons, which are the building blocks of plastics, and you want to capture those so that you can make new products with them. And there's a many number of different methods of pyrolysis for plastics. And pyrolysis, by the way, also can apply to not just plastics, but a number of different waste streams and other applications. But specifically with plastics, you're trying to heat up the plastics to a point where they break down, vapors are released, and you capture those vapors. And again, in the beginning of pyrolysis, it was done through combustion and fire. Now, what we have, this has progressed obviously for 50 years, and the inventor of the technology that we have has been in pyrolysis specifically as his field of study and research and his career for over 30 years. And so he's seen it evolve, and he's in large part been the change. And the technology, the new version of his technology now will be, I truly believe, the leading technology in advanced recycling. And so what we have now is a process that heats the plastic, but at very precise temperatures. It heats the plastic at very precise temperatures in a full oxygen-free vacuum environment where there's no pressure, there's no combustion, there's no catalyst in the reactor, if you will, to heat these up. And it's thermal decomposition, kind of most relatable technology would be like a microwave. The microwave radiation is heating, your food, if you will, kind of from the inside out. And so this is a similar technology. It's very precise, and as you can imagine, different plastics have different melting points for different temperatures at which they release the vapors. And so this is all part of the algorithm, if you will, for the heating mechanisms. And the vapors are released from the plastics. The valuable ones rise. Some of the really heavy hydrocarbons remain as a liquid format within the reactor, and we capture those vapors and turn them back into a liquid form, into an oil, and then that oil is the building blocks again for new plastics. So what's novel about our process is that we've been able to figure out how to do this without any air or water emissions. So you think about...
Say that again. Hold on. Say that again.
What is novel?
No emissions? No air or water emissions?
Zero emissions. No air or water emissions from our pyrolytic process, which is a game changer.
And so the other people, because you're not the only one who's trying to break down plastics, what are the other processes doing? What type of emissions are those emitting?
Well, there's one pretty sizable operation in the U.S. right now that is using pyrolysis to convert plastics, and they claim that their plant, their facility that does this recycling, emits what is equivalent to a medium-sized hospital. And I really like the way that they put it, because it's clever in that you think of a hospital, you don't think of a lot of emissions. But you don't see smokestacks out of a hospital typically. But you think about the amount of emissions that actually come out of a hospital, and it's quite significant. Waste, hospital waste, medical waste is a large emission from a hospital, and that's a significant amount of plastic waste that typically always ends up in landfill. So they have, every other process has some sort of emissions, whether air or water, and there have been other endeavors to build these conversion facilities with a different pyrolysis technology, and they've been thwarted by environmentalists that just say, it's either we don't know exactly what it's emitting into our environment through water or through the air, or it's just too much emissions for to be a clean process. And so our process, our technology here, really takes the emissions out of the equation, which therefore I really think takes any argument against it out of the equation. We're processing plastic waste. But you can argue that we shouldn't produce any more plastics, and I disagree that can be a reality, even though that would be nice. But we're creating a solution for the waste, and instead of using crude oil that's extracted from the earth to create new plastics, we're using old plastics to make new plastics, and just as high quality as before. So I think you can kind of wrap your head around this potential and how it can be a real viable solution.
Okay, so I'm somewhat acting like this is my first time listening to this, as if I was a listener here, but obviously I'm deeply engaged with it. But I learn stuff every time I talk to you too. So what we're saying is plastic waste, major problem. We have a number of different efforts that are going on to try to do something with that. But most of them are, I don't want to say just as harmful, but maybe some cases more harmful to the environment, some cases a little bit less. But either way, we are still harmful to the environment in our efforts to try to try to decompose this plastic in a way that we can reuse that. And so what Renu has is a way to take all of this waste, and we're not just talking plastic, by the way, here, which I mentioned tires earlier. We're talking. Why don't you hit that quick here, Alex? What all do your machines process?
So through the same technology, we can process used mechanical oils, lubrication oils, any engine oil. We can do tires as well, used tires. We have to go through, everything has to do some sort of light pre-processing with the tires. They need to be shredded and the stainless steel cables removed, which is a normal, it's normal equipment. Medical waste is a big one that you don't think about it, but the majority of medical waste that comes out of a hospital is some sort of plastic. IV bags, syringes minus the sharps. It's you don't think of, it's not a bunch of bandages and gauze. It's a lot of plastic. So that's a huge problem. And we can, and touching back on the types of plastic, we can process just about any type of plastic waste. PVC is something that we try to avoid because of PVC is polyvinyl chloride. The chloride content is just not good for, number one, not good for the equipment. As chlorine oxidizes stainless steel and it's not good. And it's also just not good for a final product to create new plastics from. So we minimize the amount of PVC. That we do have a threshold to where it's acceptable, and that's kind of a standard, I guess, contamination level, if you will. But everything else from shampoo bottles down to car bumpers and even things like Crocs and styrofoam packaging are all acceptable through our process.
Styrofoam too.
Yeah, especially styrofoam, okay. Actually. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Yeah. We've always grown up hearing about how bad styrofoam was for the environment. Which I'm sure it is. All these things are. Okay. So now we have, you guys can take all of those in, you can process them emissions free. And then, which I said that so lightly, you can process those emissions free, which is dramatic. And then out the other side of that comes what?
Comes a clean. We're yet to name our final product, which is something that we're deciding on now. But I guess to be technical, it's a light to medium industrial oil. If you look at the oil in a clear jar, it'll range in color from a very light yellow down to a kind of a dark yellow with some brown hues. The oil is high in naphtha content, which naphtha is a derivative from refining crude oil, which holds the precursors for polymerization of plastics. And so it's a very suitable oil to create circular plastic products with. It can also be refined. Sorry, I don't know if I want to go there at all. I'm talking to you directly right now. Refined for transportation fuel or not. If we want to focus on just circularity, I say we do that.
No, I think. Well, I think we're about to wrap this one up, so I think you can go ahead and say it can also be refined for transportation.
Okay.
Yep.
The oil we produce can also be refined for transportation fuels, but we're really focusing on creating circularity with plastics, so that we can be less dependent on crude oil.
Okay. All right. Well, now listeners, you get to understand why we are so excited about Renu, so excited about Alex and the work that you guys are doing. The potential here is this could be the solution to the problem, and we'll talk more next week, because the problem is so large that to make sure that this solution is more than a drop in the bucket takes effort here, but the technology is there and available, and so that's dramatic. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. Next week, we're going to dig deeper into the business side of this. We're going to understand Renu Environmental, their business plan. We're going to understand their different profit centers. We are going to dig into the something called environmental financial assets, these EFAs, what the government is doing here, and then what, again, trying to understand from a private equity viewpoint what an investment here looks like. So, Alex, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next week.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.